Welcome to Still Here, the podcast from C Magazine about queer history, culture, and the people who shaped it. I'm the host, Leslie Clarke. My guest today is Professor Marcus Collins, a historian of modern Britain at Loughborough University. His research covers sexuality, politics, and popular culture. But it's a chance archival discovery that brought him to international attention. While searching the BBC Written Archives Centre, Marcus came across a forgotten transcript of the corporation's very first documentary on homosexuality, made in 1953. Shelved for 4 years, broadcasted in edited form in 1957, and then lost. But the transcript survived, and what it contains tells us something profound about who we were, what the state believed about queer people, and how far we have and haven't come. Marcus's research has since inspired a stage play, a short film from Loughborough University, and renewed public interest in a chapter of British broadcasting history. He's here today because this story belongs to all of us. Marcus, welcome to Still Here. Take me back to the moment you found that file. I think you said you were getting a little bored in the archives when you noticed a label marked Sexual Offences 1953 or something. What made you open it?
Well, I couldn't resist finding out what the BBC would have to say about a subject like that, because the BBC at the time was very much known for its puritanical nature. It was known as Auntie Beeb, and it had the kind of morals that you might expect of a maiden aunt. It really had this notion that it was broadcasting for everybody, and so anything that it would broadcast could potentially be heard by anybody. So if there was something that could potentially disturb or offend a 5-year-old, then they would, on the whole, decide not to broadcast it. So imagine if you have those kind of restrictions on you, what could you conceivably say about sex, let alone sexual offences? And so I was really intrigued and opened the file and became even more intrigued.
I mean, that's super interesting. What were you actually hoping to find that day?
I didn't know. I mean, this is a very strange place. This is the BBC Written Archives Centre. And this is a bungalow which is in the suburbs of Reading and contains a ridiculous amount of material dating back to the origins of the BBC in the 1920s. And it was the first time I'd ever been there. I'd always been kind of meaning to go there, and then finally found an excuse to go and was researching something completely different. And this whole world of not only broadcasting, but just British society in the 20th century kind of opened up. And you have all of these files and records of programs that about every topic under the sun, that made me think, oh, this is something new. And in this case, it was new because it was the first concerted attempt by not only the BBC but any major broadcaster in the world, I think, to record a program about homosexuality. And for the BBC to do it, with the BBC being at the time a monopoly broadcaster in Britain, and having this immense reputation for being authoritative, it was a heck of a project to take on. And so the interesting thing about the file to me was that it did contain this transcript that you already mentioned, but it also contained all of the correspondence back and forth between the program makers and the participants in the program, and then these internal memos. And so my um, curiosity and perplexity about how could the BBC possibly broadcast on a subject like this was a perplexity shared by people within the BBC at the time, and also by politicians, by journalists, by members of the public who all had their own thoughts about what the BBC was and also what homosexuality was, and they're all preserved within this file and within related documents that I put, pieced together over a number of years.
I believe the transcript was for a program that was recorded in May 1954.
That's right.
Under the title "Homosexuality: The Condition, the Code, and the Crime." Right?
Indeed, yes, yes. Tells you everything you need to know.
Absolutely. I'm curious to understand what does it say about how the BBC understood what it was making.
Okay, so the context of this is that in 1953 there's a whole series of high-profile prosecutions of aristocrats, well-connected journalists for sexual offences, and the direction that Britain would go as a result of this was really undetermined. So some people saw these prosecutions and they said, more of the same. We need to clamp down on this nefarious behaviour. And isn't it a jolly good thing that the government is finally taking action and clearing our streets and our public conveniences of all of these naughty people? And there were other people who said, isn't this outrageous that the real immorality here is not so much what these people are doing behind closed doors, but the fact that we are prosecuting and imprisoning them, and this is not a civilized society which should live and let live. And so this was one of the homosexuality was not widely discussed in public up to the early 1950s. And then suddenly you have all of this discussion going on, and the BBC thinks, okay, we are the voice of the nation. There is all of this press comment about this, and we don't want to be like, the tabloid press. We don't want to be sensationalistic about it all. But at the same time, can we actually say something which is authoritative, which isn't too salacious, and which really kind of says sensible, reliable things about homosexuality? And so the guy who proposed this program initially was gay. I don't know if people knew that he was gay at the time, in terms of his colleagues, or I have no idea. But he founded a gay Catholic organization, or ran a gay Catholic organization a couple of decades later. So he obviously had skin in the game. But the way that he presented it is that, the BBC's got a responsibility to say something really solid and sober and serious about homosexuality, because that's what the BBC is for. It needs to inform the public so the public can then make a decision about what to do. And so everything was sort of couched in this language of balance and impartiality and so on. And this extended to who they would invite on this program. So if you want people to be impartial about homosexuality, you can't really bring homosexual men to this program because they're obviously biased. They're obviously going to. So what you do is you bring on the sort of great and the good. So you bring on clergymen and lawyers and social workers and psychiatrists, and they will be able to tell you in a dispassionate way what this phenomenon of homosexuality was and what we should as a society do about it. And so the only gay guy they had on the program was a reformed homosexual. So somebody who had actually committed some kind of offence which was serious enough to put him in jail for a number of years. So it must have been a pretty, major offence by the standards of the day, and who came out of jail and managed by sheer willpower to convert himself into being a straight man. And he found the right woman, married, left that past behind him, and he appeared on the program as showing that there was hope to be able to be cured, quote unquote, of this homosexual condition.
That is interesting, isn't it? Because I think even today the BBC tries, and there is a huge argument around how impartial the BBC actually is. But I think to this day there is the notion of trying to be the voice of the nation and trying to present balanced views, and then to bring on someone who thinks of himself as a reformed homosexual. I think that is quite imbalanced, but let
For
you know what
sure,
I mean?
yeah. And there were people. We don't know a lot about how gay men at the time responded to this program, and the play tries to imagine how one man of the time might have responded. There is a letter in the archives which is from a guy who says, "Look, I'm a homosexual. I am perfectly proud of being homosexual, and I am appalled that you would have what he refers to as a hollow mockery of this reformed individual." Because he says this guy is obviously not gay. Because he talks about having been sexually abused by a woman when he was a child, and so he is obviously just psychologically damaged, doesn't represent our community at all, and he wants people like Peter Wildeblood, who was one of these people who got caught up in the prosecutions in 1953-54, to appear on the program, because he thinks those are the real homosexuals who have come to terms with their sexuality, and they need to be represented, and that would actually inform public opinion. So he thinks it's a travesty of a program, but that's only one voice. What other people made of the program at the time? We have a few reviews, but we don't have a sense of wider gay reception of this program at the time. It's almost impossible to tell.
Yeah.
But what we do know is, if you look at studies of gay men at the time, a lot of them did go to their vicar or go to their GP and say, "Look, I'm I am this way. What can I do about it? And it's very, very understandable,
Yeah.
because it was such a, hostile environment. There was nothing very gay about being gay, in this period when it was a criminal offence, when there were no positive representations of what it was like being gay, and a lot of people, not just straight people, but a lot of gay people had these ideas that there was somehow, something that had happened in their childhood, which maybe they could, fix. So this idea um, of correcting homosexuality was very prevalent at the time amongst gay people as well as straight people. The difference being that gay people, when you look at these surveys, they might have gone to their vicar or gone to their doctor, but they then find out that, they, for obvious reasons, nothing can be done, really. And so they know from experience that this is just a, futile endeavor trying to, turn themselves straight. And so, however difficult it is to be gay at the time, that's how they are. And so that's what comes out of the surveys. But the way that this program was put together, it was there were a whole number of people who were talking about how to, as they saw it, help homosexual men either become straight or effectively become asexual. So, devote themselves to the life of the church or something
Right.
like that, so that they would sublimate their sexuality. But there was no, the psychiatry was very interested in this issue at the time. Psychoanalysis was in its heyday, and what comes out very strongly from this program is you've got a lot of people who claim expertise. They think they're experts. They really know very, very little about homosexuality because there's very, very little information. But they have some kind of, from their point of view, hope that this is an illness that can be cured, or this is a moral defect that can be corrected. So, and those are the people. This is the really strange thing which comes out of this program, in my view. Those are kind of the liberal ones, right? Those are the people who are on the side of decriminalization, and because they see criminalization as like the wrong approach. Because if you want to, if you want to help these people, the last thing you do is put them incarcerate them with hundreds of other men. That's a terrible thing to do. What you should be doing is you should be deeply sympathetic and understanding, but also trying to, if possible, change them, and cure them. And those are the progressives at the time.
I mean, it is interesting, isn't it? Because when you, from today's perspective, if you now look at this, you think, "Oh my God, what on earth is going on?" But obviously, we need to remind ourselves this was a really different time. But one thing I can't help myself but see a certain a connection to today's events. I call it sanewashing, when you bring on experts, doctors, lawyers to explain certain worldviews, to give the impression that this is okay, this is all right, because if that person says it, it must be true.
Yeah.
So obviously I see certain similarities or certain strategies applied in the US. There's a lot of insanity going around at the moment, if you don't mind me saying that, and yeah, so that's just an observation. But you also touched on something interesting when you said liberal worldviews or liberal positions. Probably from today's perspective, hard to believe. But what because you had a proper look at it, you discovered this. Can you give us an idea of what liberal actually looked like back in the days of the liberal end of opinion?
Yeah. So the people who the presenter on this program was a former police officer who had then got involved in a whole bunch of um, permissive movements. Okay, and he ended up being the chair of the Homosexual Law Reform Society, which was this what was known as a homophile society. So it contained both straight and gay people. But it was pushing for law reform. That was founded after this program was broadcast, and the way he told it is that he felt a need for an organization of this kind because of the response to this program. So the response both from a lot of very sad gay people who are getting in touch with him, and also the response from sort of God botherers who were saying, these people are terrible and they should be punished as much as possible. Also on the program was another chair of the same organization that, as I say, came into being in 1958, so a year after this program was created. And he was a physician who had actually chemically castrated what seems to have been a child molester a couple of decades before, but who again had the notion that a lot of gay people could potentially, if they really put their mind to it and they wanted to, turn themselves straight with the help of doctors. So these were and then you had clergymen. So there was a sort of liberal Christian wing who felt that the church needs to accept everybody because we were all sinners, but they did see gay people as needing help to come to terms with their sexuality, but if they can, to leave their sexuality behind them. So all of these liberal people, they did acknowledge that there were some people who were never going to be changed out of their sexuality, but they saw those people as very unfortunate. Okay, so
Right.
they didn't see this as being something that was in any way equal to heterosexuality. They saw this as being effectively some kind of disability.
Mhm.
And then they thought that there were some other people who were kind of, more borderline cases who might have been led astray or might have had some kind of adverse experience in childhood. And those people could potentially end up being, potentially marriageable propositions. So if we use our kind of terminology and our perspective from the 21st century, everybody who is involved in this program, and I would say almost everybody who speaks about homosexuality in the 1950s is homophobic from our perspective, because there's no sense of of sexuality just being a spectrum or being um, a variety of potential sexualities, all of which are completely legitimate. People
Yeah.
should just, take pleasure where they can and live their own lives. There isn't that argument being made in the 1950s, and when decriminalization comes in the 1960s, based largely on the recommendations of the Wolfenden report, which is published in 1957. Um, the the arguments for that are also based on the same idea. Um, they're based on the notion of homosexual men as being um, basically unfortunates who should not be persecuted, um, but they should be tolerated, and but tolerated, but also fundamentally pitted as
Hmm.
being, you know, you know second class people who can't experience the full um, fulfillment of marriage and having children, and so they have these very normative ideas of what um, how lives should be led,
Yeah. Yeah.
and if people aren't leading those kinds of lives, um, then okay, you don't put them in prison for it,
Hmm.
and you extend your hand of friendship, perhaps, but you don't think of them as equivalents or equals, or in my view, I think that is the the fundamental mindset which I think we find very, very difficult to comprehend now.
What what always strikes me, because I mean, clearly, at some point we took the wrong exit. Because I remember, well, I don't remember, but I wasn't alive back then. But I did do some research, and there were pockets in Europe post World War Two and One, who are actually, even from even from today's perspective, quite liberal. Um, and then at some point, we absolutely took a massive step back, probably post World War Two, actually. So really, really unfortunate. But you mentioned the Wolfenden report, and I think the program was aired either just weeks before or after?
Yeah, just weeks before.
Before. Um, do you think why this timing? Was there a certain motivation to air just weeks before the report
Yeah, absolutely.
launched?
Yeah, so it the program is bound up in a funny way with the Wolfenden Commission.
Hmm.
Um, so there's the same initial impetus. So these these high profile cases and the notion that there is a lot more homosexual activity happening. So that you
Hmm.
have these crime statistics coming out in 1953, which says, there are these number of prosecutions now, and this is like 10 times the number there were in the 1930s. So, there's this notion that this is somehow escalating. Um, so both both the program and the Wolfenden report um, were a product, a reaction to that. Um, Wolfenden himself, he um, he needs to be understood much more, and I only understand sort of small aspects of his life. That somebody needs to write a biography of Wolfenden because he's a very odd man, and why he was appointed to do this is somewhat shrouded in mystery. But in 1953, he um, was on one of the first ever programs to talk about homosexuality, its legalization. So this preceded the program that's the basis of the BBC's first Homosexual, this play. But he there introduced on this program this idea of a distinction between public and private, and a distinction between the law and morality. So he thinks that homosexuality is immoral. Okay, he's a Christian. He is under no he's in no doubt about that. But he thinks that not everything that is immoral should be made illegal. So he brings up the case of adultery. So everybody accepts adultery, it's banned under the Ten Commandments, but we don't send people to prison for being adulterers. In the same way, we shouldn't be sending people to prison for having sex with people of the same sex, provided they do it in private. Okay, so that's the distinction between public and private. That you keep yourself to yourself. If you're doing things behind closed doors, then that's okay. Well, no, it's not okay, but it's not offending other people. It's not disturbing other people. It's your own business to sin in private. Okay.
Right.
He introduces this distinction in 1953 on one of these early, very, very early programs. He then gets involved in this debate about homosexuality more publicly in replying to an article anonymously written by Mary Whitehouse. So Mary Whitehouse writes an article for the Sunday Times about how, as a good Christian mother, this is the way that you can prevent your son becoming gay. Okay. And the answer is basically by praying a lot. And so she writes this anonymously. He then responds also in the Sunday Times and says, well, this is all a bit silly because, I'm the headmaster of a public school, or I was headmaster of a public school, and there's really, people just go through this phase. You shouldn't worry about it too much. And so as a result of that, both him and Mary Whitehouse are asked to be on this program. He says yes, and records a piece for the program, but then he's tapped up to be on this commission in 1954, and so withdraws from the program and says, you can't use this because, this is a conflict of interest. Mary Whitehouse doesn't agree to be on the program, and this is before Mary Whitehouse is known by anybody, really. She's not a public figure at all. She doesn't agree to be on this program, probably because she just doesn't, it's just such an unpleasant subject. She doesn't want to be associated with it. Yeah. But then in 1954, the program had always been recorded as on an experimental basis, as they put it. So the BBC say, okay, we understand that as the BBC, we should probably say something about homosexuality. But as the BBC, we actually can't say something about homosexuality. So what we're going to do is we're going to record a program, a proper program with all of these people like John Wolfenden, but then we won't release it. And so once they record it, there are some people in the BBC who say, hey, we really should release this. I mean, what's the problem here? We've done a decent job. But the Director General says no. He vetoes it because he just thinks that, the BBC should not be dirtying its hands with such issues, basically. But then 3 years later, the Wolfenden report is just about to come out, and so the BBC takes its cue from the government, and they have the view that if the government can commission this report and publish this report, and Parliament can debate this report, then obviously it's a respectable enough topic for the BBC to actually discuss. And so they then think, oh, okay, we've actually got this documentary in our locker. Let's rush release this. So they do that a few weeks before the Wolfenden report comes out. And once the Wolfenden report comes out, Wolfenden appears frequently on BBC, ITV, to make the case for decriminalisation. There's a whole bunch of other programs that come out during this time, and you begin to have other gay guys who are interviewed so the day after the Wolfenden report comes out, there's a gay guy interviewed on a Granada television program. So the first openly gay guy to appear on British television. But I say openly, he says he's gay, but he is anonymized. He's filmed in the shadows. So you have all of this, and then that produces a backlash. So there are all the sort of merry White House types who say, how dare the BBC discuss this issue at all? This is just smutty, it's sensationalistic, it's going to corrupt our children. And so this issue goes back to the same Director General, and he says he has this edict that the BBC, after this Wolfenden report palaver, we will no longer broadcast anything about homosexuality except in special circumstances and on special occasions. So the line is, we've said everything there is to say about homosexuality, and we've probably said more than we should have said. We've overdone it because we had about 20 programs, which but compared to what had happened before, it did seem like a flood of programs. But we are not going to say anything more unless we absolutely have to, because it really is, it's really not what the BBC should be about, to talk about such issues. And that does have a bit of a chilling effect on BBC programs for the next few years. And so the next time somebody comes along with a proposal for doing a documentary about homosexuality, they bring out this file, the same file that I was looking at in the BBC Written Archive Centre, and plonk it on his desk and say, read through that, and you'll see why you really shouldn't be pursuing this topic. And he does anyway, but with him as well, it still takes years for this documentary to see the light of day. And so the next full documentary about homosexuality from 1957 on radio, the next one is 1964 or 65.
Right.
So 8 years, and that's an 8 years without. And if you imagine, that you're a gay guy in the late 1950s, early 1960s, and there is nothing there for 8 years of a factual nature that appears on radio. There's virtually nothing on television. That's this sort of drought of information makes. If you imagine what it must have been like if you were just sort of discovering your sexuality, then it's it is a very different world, this world of social media and so on that we have now, and with all of its pros and cons, but people are not short of information.
Oh no. That's for sure. Um, it's interesting. I think it is unimaginable, honestly, to try and picture me living in a world where information doesn't really exist around sexuality and how to, I mean, quite frankly, discover yourself and make
Mm.
sense of how you feel and who you are. But there is something in there which you said. I mean, it's always the children, isn't it? That same argument, and I think
Oh yeah.
we're approaching. Give it 20 more years, and it will be 100 years of people saying, protect the children. Don't let them get close to either gay people or trans people. It's the same story, just, told from a slightly different angle, but it's always the core narrative
Yeah.
that those people are dangerous and they will corrupt the children. I find it highly fascinating that, the tune hasn't changed, and it's been,
Yeah.
almost, well, yeah, I mean, at least 70. It's been going on for 70 years. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Highly
And it's
interesting. Yeah.
because, Britain likes to think of itself as being, the sort of freeborn Englishman type thing, that we are a land of liberty.
Mm, mm.
And so outright demands for censorship are most effective if they're couched in protecting children as opposed to protecting adults from
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah.
And in the 1950s, yeah, it was so. The idea was that gay people were a direct threat to children because there was this conflation of homosexuality with paedophilia.
Mm, mm, mm.
And there was this notion that gay people um, sort of corrupted the youth, and that was how they kept, um, you know, homosexuality alive, kind of thing. But there was also this notion that information that children got would corrupt them. So if they weren't
Mm.
directly corrupted, the very having these thoughts put in their head might lead them astray. And you're absolutely right. Yeah, I mean the parallels with um, trans people now are very, very strong.
Yeah.
That there is this notion that trans people are kind of recruiting, and that children need to be protected from these ideas. Um, and there's also the same kind of notion of the sort of novelty and suddenness of trans issues. We didn't hear anything about this, 20 years ago. Now suddenly this is on the agenda, and
Yeah.
people don't know what to make of it. And
Yeah.
exactly the way that people didn't know what to make of homosexuality in the 1950s.
You are right to say, I mean, Wolfenden seemed to be a really, for the time he was living in, definitely an odd view on how to engage with homosexuality. And I'd be interested to know, do you know from looking at internal correspondence, do you get any sense of individual people within the BBC who were personally sympathetic, trying to push forward? Or do you think someone like Wolfenden, being the absolute outlier, how he viewed homosexuality?
I mean, I don't think Wolfenden was an outlier in the sense that I think that, as we were talking about before, his views were pretty much in line with other liberals of the time,
Okay. Yeah.
of believing that homosexuality was inferior but should not be persecuted.
Hmm.
And so there's quite a lot of people within the BBC who put forward these arguments, and they are people who, generally speaking, are on the are in sort of centre left. Um, so they are often people who are involved in making programs about single motherhood or apartheid or things like that. So they see broadcasting as having this kind of moral mission, um, and that there are these social issues which, if they bring them to light, then hopefully there is going to be some kind of policy solution to them. Okay, so you've got a whole bunch of people in the BBC and in ITV, come to that, who are pushing this case, but then you've got people who are more traditionalist and
Hmm.
who are very frightened of the reputational damage that this could do to the BBC, um, if they do cover this. And they had reason to be frightened because there is this backlash, as I mentioned before, from the sort of Merry Whitehouse Brigade. Um, there are also people who think that this, even even if they might be sympathetic to gay people, they think that the that this will ju- bringing any attention to gay people is going to result in a sort of backlash against them. Um, and so there's a whole that there's a whole bunch of um, memos flying back and forth about what is the best way to approach this. Um, and the BBC has a reputation for having some gay people in it. Um, this it's fingered by the British Medical Association as being one of these kind of nests of homosexual activity at the time. Um, there's an MP in the 1930s who, in a House of Commons debate, talks about how there were lots of pansies in the garden of Broadcasting House and all this sort of stuff. So um, the BBC is quite divided over these issues, um, and it remains that way. Um, this work I've done on the 1950s. It's part of um, a broader project. It will, in fact, initiated a broader project. So I look back at the very, very origins of discussions of homosexuality in the 1930s, and go forward to the 1980s, and it's always a kind of litmus test um, of um, broadcasters' liberality and what broadcasting should achieve. And it's also very important to gay people because
Hmm.
this is their way of um, connecting to straight society, to put their case, and also to speak to closeted people. And so anybody who is not already out and is going to, the local gay bar, um, how else are you going to reach them at a time when there's no gay press, in the 1950s?
Yeah.
Um, there's, there's a handful of books that are being published. There's no gay organization. Um, there are no gay organizations, actual gay as opposed to homophile organizations until the early 1960s. And so if you get on air and have a chance to discuss this, you can define your own identity rather than having it defined for you, and
That's right.
hope that this can be a sort of model for other people.
Now the recording is gone.
Yeah.
Do you believe in a sort of deliberate accident, or was this generally just, swallowed up by time,
Yeah.
just got lost?
It's there aren't very many recordings
Right.
that survive from this period.
Okay.
So there are a few um, recordings of other programs about homosexuality which have survived. And if anybody's interested in them, they're actually all on the BBC website, basically. And those are all feature John Wolfenden. So the Wolfenden report was a big news event, and the BBC preserved a number of those tapes, and they make for fascinating listening and viewing. But the documentary itself, it would be surprising if it had survived,
Mhm.
because almost no documentaries from that period have. Um, and so, yeah, there's no it's more cock up than conspiracy, if you see what I
Right.
mean.
Luckily, the transcript has become a stage play. So it's not just there in written form, but actually something you can experience. What
Yep.
made you want to take it out of the archive and into a theatre?
Okay, so I should say from the outset that I am a deeply untheatrical person. I have no skills in in this area, but
Right.
I when I what happened was that the BBC was celebrating its centenary in 2022, and they hired me to put on a bunch of events
Hmm.
um, to commemorate their centenary. And one of the things that I um, wanted to do was to find these lost broadcasts and find kind of inventive ways to bring them back to life. So take them off the page and reimagine them. And luckily, I was put in touch with Stephen Hornby, the
Hmm.
playwright, and he is an old hand at um, putting together plays based on archival material about queer history, and so was the perfect person to approach. He did something very interesting, I think, which was that he was basically he read this transcript and was, heartily offended by its contents, as you would be, and thought, I don't want to just, present large chunks of this offensive um, content on stage. So I'll have a bit of that to give you a flavour of this. And he saw, like I did, the sort of dramatic potential of the, attempts to get this on air, and the many years where it was being mothballed and all of that. So he had those two elements, but he then put in a completely fictional element, um, and that's of a young guy who works at Burton's Tailors called Tom, who is discovering his sexuality and discovering the burdens of that sexuality within a society which criminalizes it. And he juxtaposes this coming of age story for Tom with the making and broadcasting of this program, and then imagines what somebody like Tom might have made of this program at the time. And so I think this is a really nice um, contrast to create between all of these mainly straight people in broadcasting house and what they thought about homosexuality in this period, and then this slice of life of a gay guy at the same time. And it also means that you have this sort of contrast between sort of tragedy um, of what living in a persecutory society and the sort of comedy of these apparent experts who don't really understand what's going on, and a contrast between the factual elements of it. So he has been very true to the um, to the making of the program, and includes excerpts from the program, and then the fiction of this imagined life in the 1950s. So he did a really stand up job with the play, and it went on a very successful national tour earlier this year, and now it is going to be restaged. First of all in Dublin at the International Gay Theatre Festival, and then it'll be coming to the Edinburgh Fringe in August. So it's really I'm really pleased how it's turned out, and I can say that because the content of the play is all of Stephen's work. The production of the play is all to the credit of the director and the actors. I can just kind of look on with admiration. It's their baby, not my baby, but it's a great baby.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, fantastic. Can you fill us in? I think I read something about a community forum
Yep.
after each performance. What's the idea behind this?
Okay, so again, the Stephen was very, very keen as the playwright to draw contemporary parallels with with these historical events. I'm a historian, so I'm very happy just treating the past as the past, but he really wanted to connect it to the present, and in particular to connect the discussions of conversion therapy that are predominant in this program in the 1950s with the continuing failure of the of Parliament to ban conversion therapy now. So he thought that it would be really nice to have community forums which would be chaired by activists, campaigners, people like Peter Tatchell, for
Mhm.
example, who would then draw parallels between the past and the present, and then bring in audience members to have their say about what they thought. And the audience members, who also have filled out hundreds and hundreds of feedback forms, have found it, that they've enjoyed the play, but they've also found it very affecting. Often there's a lot of gay men of a certain age who there were some who lived through that
Uh,
period, but there are more who were, growing up in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and they were living in the wake of that time. and experienced some of the same prejudice. And there are also people from other countries who were just remarking how this stuff is still going on. So the community forums were really good at bringing out people's own experiences and allowing them to relate them to the play. And that was a very nice addition.
The name of this podcast is Still Here. I think the name is all about survival, persistence, and in a way, a refusal to be to be erased. Who or what are you thinking about when you sit with this archive material? Whose survival are you most conscious of?
Gosh, that's a question. Um, I am. I come at this fundamentally as an academic historian,
Mhm.
and so the the connections to the present are very important to me, but they're not important to me in the same way as they're important to Stephen, who sees this as a political project in some ways as well as an artistic one. I think it's really important to understand how people thought in the past, just in order um, to be able to place in context how we are now. This is a dimension of human experience, and what I thought, funnily enough, what I was really trying to preserve in a way as much as anything else wasn't really the voices of gay people from that period, because there aren't a lot of them in this material. Um, it's the voices um, of anti-gay people. Um, I think it's really important to understand what um, what shaped homophobia um, then. How people, why could people not understand that it's okay for other people to have a different form of sexuality to themselves?
Hmm.
I think placing yourself in that position and trying to understand um, what was it about their morality, about their knowledge, about their life experiences um, that made them fear and hate other people in this way, in a way, and that does give you a completely different perspective on sexuality, um, which which is worth understanding. It's kind of, in a way, kind of know your enemy type thing,
Yeah.
but it also gives you a certain sense of humility about how we're going to be thought of in 50 years time. I don't think that we've got all the answers. um I think that sexuality is still in flux. You look at opinion polls now, um, where there's a whole, I'm of a different generation to you, but there is a that you know there is a younger generation um, who are um, a lot of whom are saying that they're bisexual, particularly women, um, in a way that which didn't exist before. They might have felt that way, but they certainly didn't say it to pollsters. In the 1980s, which is where I kind of end historically, you've got a tiny proportion of people in Britain who say that they're gay, and a relatively small proportion of people in Britain who say they know anybody who's gay. And now we're in a different century, but it's as if we're on a different planet. What is sexuality going to look like in 50 years' time? I don't know.
Very good question. Yeah.
But this gives a sense of how fast things can move, and so maybe could give an indication that we're not standing on a pinnacle and looking down at the mistakes of the past. We are still on that journey.
Marcus, what a fantastic and interesting, insightful conversation. Thank you so much. Before I let you go and enjoy the sunshine while it lasts, is there like a final shout out, anything you'd like to say to our listeners and viewers?
Well, go to see the play if you can. In Dublin, if you happen to be in those parts, in Edinburgh, if you're visiting the festival, and failing both of those things, if everything goes right, we will have a recorded version of it, a video which will be made available next LGBT History Month. So hopefully you'll have a chance to see it and enjoy it and think about the issues that it raises.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot. And I think I will have to wait, unfortunately, till next LGBT History Month, because when Pride season kicks in June, it's going to be incredibly busy and I won't be able to leave Brighton. But if you happen to be in Edinburgh, travel to Edinburgh for the festival, or happen to live in Dublin or actually visit Dublin, please do and make any effort to see the play. Marcus, thank you so much. And hopefully, good luck with everything. And
Thank you.
let's talk again soon.
It was a pleasure. Thanks.